Well, welcome. Tonight, you're going to get a little snippet of something that I have been thinking a lot about in the last month, and that is peacemaking. Trying to figure out to some degree for me personally and professionally, what does that mean? What does that look like for me? And I find myself drawn into spheres with people that are actually doing real peacemaking work on a global scale. And some of you are familiar with Aza Karam. She was a guest on here a few months ago. And Aza sent a prayer request that we will include tonight. Let me find it. And she says, just quickly, please keep me and this group in your prayers. She's in Brussels to mediate a Palestinian-Israeli women's meeting. So that's the kind of thing she does every day. I'm just amazed by her. So anyway, when we were at the retreat a few weeks ago, we had a closing worship, and the worship team decided that they wanted the theme of the closing worship to be peace. And so as we were putting together what that closing worship was going to look like, we had a lot of aspects of peace shared throughout the service. But obviously one of the scriptures we read from multiple faiths about peace, but from Matthew 5:9, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be recognized as children of God, is probably one of the ones that's most familiar to us. And I got to thinking about blessed are the peacemakers, peacemaking. And I started thinking about how we can retreat. We can retreat into nature, into our comfort zones, into ourselves, into our like-minded communities. But we're really invited to make peace where peace is missing or fragile, kind of like what Oz is doing tonight. And we're encouraged to something intentional. The word making is what really captured me, and the fact that we have to be intentional if we want peace. And so to make peace with our neighbors, with our enemies, those we distrust, make peace with God, make peace with ourselves. And so I started thinking, okay, so where do we begin? Here, let me pull up share my screen. So well, maybe. There we go. The Dalai Lama says that world peace begins with inner peace. So what brings inner peace, I guess, is the first question for us to think about tonight.
If we believe him.
If you believe him. So Marty, let's unpack that a little bit. What do you mean?
Well, if peace begins with, I don't know, but that's the question. Would you statement, what was his statement again?
It was world peace begins with inner peace.
What's inner peace?
What is it to you?
Well, it means I feel at peace with myself and with God.
I think that resonates with me. Inner peace for me is more than just a feeling. I think inner peace for me is more of a spiritual experience of feeling like I'm okay.
Yes. Then how does that, that you're okay, and I'm okay, and Anantha's okay, et cetera, how does that lead to world peace? Well, first of all, we've got to have everybody in the world saying, I'm okay, or most of them.
I think inner peace to me is absence of guilt, absence of conflict, absence of tension, stress, anything that is worldly. And if you,
Worry.
but, and if you crack into the spiritual realm, you begin to feel that, experience that inner peace.
It could also start with forgiveness.
Yeah. Mm.
Tracy, you had your hand
Is-
up?
Well, I was thinking it's a lot like loving your neighbor. In order for us to love our neighbor, we have to love ourselves first. And I think for us to be able to have, be able to be part of peacemaking, we have to have inner peace first before we can become a peacemaker. And I think if we, for me, if I have God near, in all my thoughts and what I'm doing, then I have inner peace. I might have to remind myself of a lot of things going on,
Well, how does that
or
translate into world peace?
bingo.
Well, I would look at it as the corollary of war. So if you are full of hate and blame inside yourself, then you're easily attracted to others with hate and blame. And that means hating and blame others, which then leads to, as groups, to war. If you don't have hate and blame, then can't go to war.
Anantha and I have a friend who has made 61 trips to China on behalf of the United States government working on peace. And they had a pretty good deal going, but it's been dropped now.
Rachel?
I agree with Tracy, but I look at it more along the lines of how can you understand peace with others if you don't have peace with yourself? How can you understand it? How can you know what it's supposed to be like, what it's supposed to look like, and see it when it's happening if you haven't found it for yourself?
Because you see what it's supposed to be and what's not in your life.
But which is true, but I also look at it like one of the things I've talked to other people who don't love themselves. The hard part is you're not going to see when somebody's loving you because you don't love yourself. You don't feel you're worth it. You don't feel like all of those things. And the person could be right there in front of you and be like, hey, hi, I really want this. I think this is a good idea. But if you're not there to meet them in that, then you don't have the understanding to do it. And that's where I think that's one of the things that he's talking about. You have to find that inner peace in yourself before you can go ahead and try and even go after the world. Because how are you going to be able to not only teach that, but also have an understanding of that?
If we have inner peace, then we probably don't have negative feelings about other countries, other religions, and things like that. It could be contagious, if everybody felt that way. So are we going to spend our energy on inner peace, or are we going to talk about how China and the United States get along?
I think today's meditation with Michelle Sen, it's not about communicating to vast number of people about world peace and trying to do that, but one soul at a time, one person next to you, if you share your sense of inner peace, then the other person might also experience. And that will lead to another person, and that person reaching another person. I mean, it's, so in that sense, it's one person at a time and one day at a
That's what I meant when I said contagious.
time. I think that's, yeah,
But it has
Right.
to be intentional. I mean, I think that's why
right.
peacemaking isn't peace happening, right? It's making because people are being intentional. Lindsay, your hand's up.
Hi, Lindsay. Where are you? Oh,
Oh.
there you go.
You're muted. Lindsay, you're still muted. Okay.
Thank you. I clicked my hand down and I forgot to unclick the mute. So I guess I have a hard time with some of what is being shared, not because like I think it's a bad thing, but because, I don't feel like I have inner peace yet, but does that mean that I should not participate in peacemaking? So I think that it's both, and I think that it's the journey. So I'm never going to be fully at peace. I don't think that I ever will. Maybe one day that'd be cool. But I think that that's part of my journey, is that I'm always working on my inner peace, but I have to simultaneously engage in the world as well. So not like one in front of the other. It's both.
That makes me think about the Dalai Lama's quote. Perhaps he wasn't saying that the having inner peace will lead to world peace. Maybe he recognizes that in itself, finding inner peace, is a lifelong journey for most people, and so will be the other forms of peacemaking, but focusing on finding inner peace in ourselves through whatever means. So what are those means that work for you as you go along life, doing life? Marty's talked about faith. For me, it would be faith. What helps you work toward that inner peace in yourself?
Who are you asking?
Group. Sorry, I had to mute a few people.
Well, we're all working on it. And sometimes it's there and sometimes it isn't.
Is it relational, emotional, spiritual? What is it for you?
For me?
Sure.
Well, first of all, I'm a regular attending at a Christian church, and that helps every Sunday. And I have Christian friends like Anantha, and but I'm not in the business of peacemaking.
Why do you say that?
Well, I'm 92 years old. I'm not going to go to China and discuss with the Xi or something like that. I have some international friends. We have a daughter that's kind of our daughter, but she's really Russian and things like that. So I have some international connections, but not at any kind of level. But on the other hand, as we talk with one another, if we think that China is out to conquer the world and things like that, we need to help them understand that that's not the case. We need to help there's a lot of myths going on that we need to help dispose of. That's about all we can do.
Well, and I think there's plenty of peacemaking to happen just next door. Perhaps with somebody even of a different, not even a different religion, but a different religious tradition, or, I think there are opportunities for peacemaking that aren't, they may not make a significant impact on global relations, but I think there are opportunities for peacemaking everywhere we turn. Dad, you had your hand up?
Yes. Years ago, I read somewhere, it's but little good you'll do watering last year's crops. And I liked that so much, I preached a sermon on it in a revival I held. And I said, I've known so many people who are watering last year's crops. And I cited the story of a man in the church in McAllen, Texas, who was one of the sweetest, kindest, forgiving persons I've ever known. But his wife never forgave him for going broke by lending money to other people who needed it. And she was watering last year's crops. And I don't think we can ever have peace without stopping watering last year's crops.
Well, excuse me.
And
Oh, never mind.
I preached that sermon in the revival, and after the service was over, a man came up to me and told me, I'm a farmer. And years ago, I went broke farming, and I've never forgiven myself. I've been watering last year's crops for years. You talked about you have to have inner peace to begin with. And I think that's so true. You can never be at peace until you stop watering last year's crops.
Thank you.
Yeah, very profound.
What, Anantha?
That was very profound. I think you're right. You can't look back, and achieve peace, unless you have forgiven what's in the past, the crop from the past year. But
Okay.
I think Marty alludes to, is a pragmatist. I've known Marty for many years, very pragmatic, a realist. He, a physician background, so, he wants to resolve issues and be practical and all that stuff. So, and he is imagining, and I'm imagining too, world peace among religions. That's the macro view of peace that he is thinking, and I'm thinking too. It's like, so is this political peace? Is it religious peace? Is it cultural peace? Or what, how can we achieve different dimensions of peace? And yes, it begins with us as an individual, but how do we link that with the macro concept of peace?
We'll get there. That's coming. Sarah, why don't you do yours, and then we'll move on to the next part.
I really liked what Roy had to say there, but because I think it speaks to the importance of um doing what you can from where you are.
I want to say something about watering last year's crop. On the ranch in Montana, last year we harvested all of the alfalfa. Put them in haystacks and feed. But we irrigated this year, and the alfalfa comes back. So some of the good things in the past aren't dead. And they a little bit of watering and they're useful again. So you understand what I mean?
Mhm.
I
So
don't,
it's another good metaphor to not give up.
yeah.
Yeah. Both good metaphors.
And sometimes watering last year's crop is very important. Alfalfa's not gonna grow if we don't get some water to it.
Sue.
I have a little story of peace.
Mm-hmm.
After the retreat, we drove down to Greenville and Greer and stayed with our son and drove by our old house. And as we were driving by, we stopped and reminiscing and all between the two of us. And lo and behold, in drove the people that bought the house from us 2 years ago. We had never met them. They bought while we were here in Florida. We knew they were Muslim, but that's about all we knew. So anyway, so she pulls in the driveway, she gets out of her van, here's these people sitting in front of her house, staring, and with a big smile on her face. And we got out of our car and started to talk to her. And we stood there and talked for maybe 10 minutes, and she thanked us and told us how much she loved our house, which made us feel, really good knowing that they were taking good care of it. And she actually said, here she was dressed in her whole hijab. I mean, only her face showing. So, different religion, different race, different, everything. So sweet, so gracious. And then as we were leaving, she said, how often do you come up here? And I said, oh, a couple of times, 3 times a year. She said, well, the next time you come up, you let me know. And I want to have you guys over for dinner.
Oh, that's nice.
I thought that was so sweet.
That's wonderful.
She did not have to do that.
No, she didn't. And one thing I found is when we have an opportunity to break bread with somebody, particularly of another culture or religion or something that is vastly different from what our experiences have been, our eyes are really opened to some really beautiful things and wonderful things about those people that are different from me. So I'm hoping that you take advantage of her invitation.
We plan on it.
Good. All right, well, let's move along. So, looking to make peace on a larger scale, as Anantha and some of us have kind of been looking at how do we make a bigger impact? Sometimes I think there is a tendency, not necessarily in peacemaking specifically, but in some arenas where we feel that what can just one person do? And I think when we think of anything on a global scale or even a national scale, it can feel a little overwhelming. And so maybe finding some common ground is a good place to start.
There's a suit and tie, leaving a 5 for a waitress, scraping by on minimum wage. There's a preacher man in a Cadillac, driving by a cardboard sign that says Jesus saves. There's a hometown quarterback with his bags packed, all dressed up in army green. Just fighting for the right to see old glory fly and someone to take a knee. And we're all on a different journey. We're all finding our own way. We're all living, we're all learning from the cradle to the grave. We're all weak, we're all strong, we're all right, and we're all wrong. And when time runs out, we all end up in common ground. We're the haves and we're the have-nots, and we've all got reasons why we do or don't. But the lines that separate us while we're here are gonna disappear when we're gone. 'Cause we're all on a different journey. We're all finding our own way. We're all living, we're all learning from the cradle to the grave. We're all weak, we're all strong, we're all right, we're all wrong. And when time runs out, we all end up losing all these labels that we wear, so we can find it here or we can find it there. 'Cause we're all on a different journey. We're all finding our own way. We're all living, we're all learning from the cradle to the grave. We're all weak, we're all strong, we're all right, we're all wrong. And when time runs out, we all end up in common ground. Common ground.
So if we want to be peacemakers on a global scale, perhaps, or in our larger communities, Hans Küng said that there will be no peace among the nations without peace among the religions, and no peace among the religions without dialogue between the religions. Some of you know that I just took an intensive course on interreligious dialogue at the beginning of May, and was introduced to this man, Hans Küng, and since then have discovered a few other groups, organizations that have taken that. There was a group that started that he actually was president of for a time, the Foundation for a Global Ethic. But there have been others that have come together to try to find a way to bring peace through spiritual and religious people. The Earthwise Constitution and the 6 guiding principles of the Native American indigenous communities is one. And then the global ethic that was written by the Parliament of the World's Religions is another one. And I'll share a little bit with you about the global ethic. The global ethic is a landmark declaration of the Parliament of the World's Religions, stating the universal values and principles shared by the world's religious, spiritual, and cultural traditions. Though it emerged from consultations with scholars and religious leaders from many of the world's religions and regions, the global ethic is a statement of basic ethical commitments shared by people throughout the globe, religious or not. The global ethic responds to an urgent practical need as well as a deep spiritual hunger for clear moral guidance on the most fundamental issues of human life and conduct. It expresses a minimal set of principles for committed action in a world torn by violence, religious and racial hatred, oppression of women and minority groups, extremes of wealth and poverty, and the growing threat of climate change and destruction of the natural world. A major achievement of the global ethic is to demonstrate that there is agreement on these issues. It recognizes that beyond legislated laws and conventions, there must be changes in people's minds, hearts, and ways of life. So I started thinking as I was reading for this class about this concept of a global ethic, not specifically the parliaments, but just the concept of a global ethic. And I said, don't we have one? Don't we already have a global ethic? Isn't it the golden rule?
In a little old log cabin one cold October morn, born to a couple was a little baby boy. He looked just like his daddy, grew more like him each day. And every day the Lord would send his baby boy, he'd say, do unto others as you have them do to you. Don't ever mistreat your fellow man. Show a little kindness and help him if you can. For the one created you also created him. Finally one day he grew up to be a man. He was called off to a battle in a faraway land. His mother stood weeping as she clutched him to her breast. And in just a few short moments he relived his childhood past. Do unto others as you have them do to you. Don't ever mistreat your fellow man. For the one created you. As you have them do to you. Don't ever mistreat your fellow man. Show a little kindness and help him if you can. For the one created you also created him.
Thank you, Jim, for those songs. So the golden rule, maybe specifically an ethic of reciprocity, but it got me thinking about this concept of a global ethic and what if that is indeed another key element to world peace. Then I thought, well, what happens to the fact that we've had the golden rule all these years and all these different religions and philosophies that are shown here teach the golden rule in their own way. And it just left me thinking, well, then if we all have had this, then really what's it going to take? Because maybe we can meet, we can do a lot of talk. As my friend Azza says, it's real easy to do a lot of talk and no action, right? We like to make these big documents and we come together and we hash out the wording and the language so that everybody's happy with this document that states what we all agree to. But apparently, in terms of religious peace and alignment, all of these traditions have some aspect of the golden rule in them, and yet we still have no world peace. So thoughts on that, Anantha?
Yeah, so, a lot of self-help groups emphasize the 3 A's, which I think have a lot of validity.
Remind me what the 3 A's are.
Awareness, acceptance, action. So I'm looking at like the awareness. We need to really look at how much do we know about all these religious philosophies and religions and political philosophies. Because when you look to the past, like you're asking the question, Michelle, very pertinently, golden rule has been there all along, right? And there's a religious scholar, and I think he's from Pakistan, but he's an American, Pakistani American, who teaches at University of Louisville, Kentucky, and he wrote a book, very carefully researched, a book called Body Count. Okay, that was the title. There's a subtitle to that, or Quantitative Review of Violence Across World Civilizations. And body count gives, at his best estimate, I mean, he did years and years of research, 578,993,500 people have been murdered in the name of religion so far in world history. Okay, more than 500 million count. The majority of that destruction has been committed by Christianity or in the name of Christianity. And it gives body count, literally, of how many Islamic people have come and killed people, how many Chinese and indigenous and even Hindu and Indic and Buddhists who believe in non-violence are the core of the religion. Continue right now. Rohingyas in Myanmar are being massacred by Buddhists of all people. I mean, this is religious violence, right? So when we have that type of we're talking about the tragic genocides, okay? How can we just bury them up and say, let's talk peace now, folks? Okay. So awareness leads to acceptance. We need to be objective in saying, yes, we have caused this destruction of world civilizations in the name of religion. That's the acceptance. And then comes the action of moving towards peace. So, in my estimate, and my opinion, unless we are completely aware of this tragedy that took place in the name of religion, and we accept that as a reality instead of debatable, we have to accept them. That's when really the process towards peace will begin. And I'm challenged by, can we bury the sad and tragic history of religions that people will forget eventually so that they can move towards peace? How can Jewish people forget the genocide under Hitler? How can Palestinians forget the destruction that's taking place right now? Anywhere you look in the world, there is some tragedy is happening as we speak in the name of religion. And sometimes it's disguised as politics, sometimes it's disguised as ethnic violence, but either way, it's all because of cultural differences. I really think we need to seriously move towards teaching history that actually accepts this kind of violence actually took place and accept it. And that's when I think next generations and the future generations can move towards true forgiveness and peace, my opinion. So, but we need to begin somewhere. It begins with my heart and me. And trying to convince Marty that this has happened. I mean, he resists it. Sometimes he doesn't accept the fact that colonialism created one of the greatest tragic genocides in the world. But they took place across several centuries, so it doesn't look like they killed millions of people. Okay? And sometimes the church was part of it. The Catholic Church in Latin America was part and parcel of this genocides, right? So how can we forgive and move? I mean, how can we actually become accepting of this tragedy? It begins with awareness, and then eventually towards peace. I mean, it's just mind-boggling to me, but you pray to God that maybe He'll give me wisdom just to change myself first, and then change the next person to me, one day at a time, one soul at a time.
Thank you. I'm so glad you said that. Little teaser for, I think it's June 23rd. I'm going to actually do another Ecclesia session on interreligious dialogue. Dialogue, not dialogue. So you'll learn the difference. But one of the things that I feel is an important step in any kind of dialogue is what I would call an ethic of singularity. And that is, Anantha, what you're discussing is that starting with the individual, both this individual and the one in front of me. And I'll go into that more deeply, obviously, another time, but I think there are so much foundational work that needs to happen before we can expect to have productive dialogue of any kind. And but when it comes to anything that's an interfaith type of an encounter, returning to our roots and knowing ourselves, not just obviously the why do I want to come to the table? Why do I want to work through this with my neighbor? But where am I coming from? Am I an exclusivist, an inclusivist, a pluralist, who am I is an important question to ask alongside, why am I doing this? And those are, to me, critical first steps when we decide, yes, I want to be a more intentional peacemaker. End of sermon. Anyone else have some thoughts on the golden rule? Jim?
Well, it's not so much on the golden rule. I want to come back to Roy and watering last year's crop,
Okay.
and Anantha in terms of awareness and acceptance. I really like this. The awareness and acceptance is very important toward understanding what happened in the past. But as far as moving forward, there's a difference between the action being a positive action versus spending a lot of time watering last year's crops. So if you're spending all your time watering last year's crops, you're not going to get to a positive action forward. But still, you have to do the awareness and acceptance of those wrongs of the past, so that those who were affected by it can feel heard. And then the action is the way to move forward. But we all get stuck on watering the crops of the past, and that keeps us from having a positive action forward sometimes.
Well, but I think in terms of our history, we need to tell those stories so that we know what happened in the past. Whereas in America, we don't tell those stories and people don't feel heard. And I don't think it's hearing those stories again and again is not, to me, not watering the past or whatever.
No, I agree, Tracy. That's the awareness and acceptance comes from understanding those stories. The action forward, a positive action forward, has to be the right balance then about what to do going forward.
And that can only happen if the people that were affected through time get to come to the table and say what that means for them, and not, have us who weren't affected say, oh yeah, we can do this and this and this, right? How many times does that not work?
Sarah?
100% with Tracy on this. In Canada, in the last, just before the pandemic and in the couple of years before, it started to come out exactly what the residential schools did to the Indigenous people in Canada, exactly what happened and exactly what those schools did. And if we have to err on one side of hearing stories, then we have to err on the side of hearing them too often before we move on and declare, okay, this is closed, let's move on, because having a little bit of overlap on this, because there are still institutions that are full of unmarked graves of the disabled people who lived in them too. I don't think that we get, I don't think that the non-Indigenous people of Canada get to decide, okay, we've heard enough now of your children buried in mass graves. I don't think that we've heard it. We've heard enough now. Let's decide that you have worked on this enough and move forward. And move forward, because this is done now, isn't it? We said our apology and we let you talk. Can't we move forward now? When we only closed these schools in 1996? And the people that are still alive are still, the people that are still alive are still drinking, and in other government institutions because of the alcohol problems we have. I'm sorry, I'm getting on a little bit of a soapbox here. I'll stop in a minute. no, we don't get to decide when to move on. The people who are affected get to move when get to move on.
Oh, she's been cut off.
Sarah, you hit
Yeah,
your
we lost you.
I think I might go. I'm obviously not in a really good place for this tonight.
Oh, Sarah, please don't go.
No. Sarah, it is.
It means a lot to you. That's why you feel like that. It's okay.
But no, I didn't mean to come across as strongly as I did just there. It's just the churches have decided the churches have obviously and as they should decided to put a lot of work into this without any acknowledgement that this happened to disabled people too. There's no acknowledgement in Canada of this as well. And that sticks in my craw, obviously.
It's clear you're passionate about it, and I think your advocacy is inspiring.
Yeah.
Anantha. Oh, I'm
Jim,
sorry.
it wasn't personal. Jim, it wasn't personal. I'm sorry.
Anantha.
No, Michelle, carry on if you have other things coming up where we can.
No. So that was my last question.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So we've still got some time to
So,
kind of
yeah. So it all really boils down to the victim and the victimizer at a micro level. Victimizer cannot determine the grieving process of the victim, right? You just can say, hello?
The what crosses?
Grieving process.
Grieving process.
Grieving process, yeah. Because, a lot of countries that have gone through incredible oppression by European countries in the name of Christianity have really not even come close to digging up the facts of how much destruction it has caused in a country like Congo, okay, by the French and the Belgian empires, how much destruction India went through under British. I mean, economists now are determining, they're actually putting some economic figures on it. $45 trillion have been taken out of India in the 200 years that British oppressed India. Okay. 45 trillion US dollars at current rate. And what I'm saying is that if they demand reparations in order to arrive at some peaceful process, it's not going to happen, and the victimizer will never agree to that process, and so there's a whole lot of things that have to occur before the victim decides, I'm done with grieving now, and I'm ready to move forward to reach a peaceful end to this. So there's a whole lot of macro level problems that countries and people who have been hurt by the religious violence are going through. I mean, under even the Muslims, the whole crusades. I mean, the tremendous number of people have been affected in the Christian world by the Islamic violence. So Buddhists on Hindus, Hindus on Muslims. So everywhere you look, there are sad histories that have to be reconciled before they move on to a sense of peace. So that's where it becomes a real challenge to. So when the world's religion, the Congress of World Religion arrive at a golden ethic, the global ethic for interfaith understanding and things like that, it's a really good and noble attempt to start that peaceful process. But whole lot of other people are not included in that dialogue, right? I mean, many countries, African religions, indigenous peoples, there are some, semblances of that in these organizations, but a whole lot of people are not in the dialogue at all. So that inclusiveness has to be there in order to even make some progress to students.
Mhm. Tom, you've got your hand up?
Yeah, looking at all seasons, good and bad, whether the crops have been watered or haven't been watered, we still have microcosms going on now today, like priests raping children and cover-ups going on. And, we've got to look at, even if there are good crops out there, we got to look at what is still going on. And that, pertains to racism, anti-Semitism, all those things. They're still going on. And that really concerns me. And when you have an institutional church like the Universal or Catholic Church, as they say it is, what do we do? It looks more than a microcosm because we have such a broad base of news and it covers such a wide area. It doesn't look like a microcosm. It looks horrible.
I think healing, there's a lot of healing of the world that needs to happen. And that only happens one individual at a time. We could stop perhaps stop some of the challenges that are brought on by or allowed to continue by an institution, but the healing is a pertinent part of the whole picture. And I think it's, that's unfortunately a person by person thing. Jim Hartley.
Well, you showed earlier the picture of the golden rule by lots of different religions. And I think that's a hint that what's been going on is not one religion versus another. It's cultural differences. It's me and them. I want my way and I don't want them to get in my way. It happens to be I belong to one religion and they belong to another. These aren't religious issues, even though they're spoken of that way. These are groups of people, clans, groups getting in touch with people. It's power, it's control over others, and not really religious issues because our religions all believe the same thing. We just don't let that get in the way of our actions when things get nasty.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else have thoughts? Rick, you've been awfully well. Obviously, we're not going to find the answer to world peace tonight, but we have
Maybe we'll pizza.
certainly kicked the hornet's nest in some ways, and also just I think sparked and it really got to see the passion that we all have and the desire that we all have for that mutual goal. How we get there is probably the answer is yes. Try this, yes. Do this, yes. The answer is always yes to whatever someone says, because if that is stirring them, it could be, the answer that will heal the world. So speaking of healing the world, I would like to pray for our own practices of peace. So if you would like, share with the group and for me in our closing prayer time, something that I can pray for you for in terms of your own journey of peacemaking. And I will add Aza to this as well. And the women at her meeting of Palestinian and Israeli women.
Is it coming up or is it?
It's right now. She's
Going
there.
on.
She's in Brussels, and I think it must be all week long because she mentioned she probably wouldn't be getting back to me much until Friday. So I don't know what the group is specifically. She just says it is mix. She's a mediator. She is mediating this meeting between these women of these two nations. So
To the TV.
any how about
Right, Tracy has something to say.
okay, Tracy.
I'd like for you to keep goal in mind, our work with justice in the Greenville community. We're sticking by each other and holding the, politicians accountable. And, I just hope that there's some, people that will stand by us when we meet in June, when we meet to celebrate. So just keep us in your prayers.
Okay.
It's a long road.
Absolutely. And I would also like to pray for your interfaith women's circle that may be starting up in July. Tracy has agreed to host an interfaith group of women here in the Greenville area and start a new conversation circle that's an intentionally interfaith conversation. So, Dave, you got your hand up.
Yes, I pray in the next 48 hours I do not hear the Beatles when I'm 64.
Dave's birthday is tomorrow, y'all.
Oh, well, happy birthday, Dave, in advance.
Rachel?
For me to be still. I'm always moving. I always have things, and I know that that's really the thing that I need to do, and I never seem to really get there.
You know, something that was shared at the retreat, just like Sue, is prayer postures, and stillness was one, solitude was mine, and I'm going to add that. Do you remember what the third one was?
Silence.
Silence. I think all three could be something that could help us hear, listen, feel, be moved. Sue?
Pray for peace for our country. We are so divided right now, even family members against family members.
Bless you, Lindsay.
Did I hear somebody? Anantha?
No, I mean, I agree with Sue. It's really a sad situation.
And I'll add Canada and those trying to navigate what's, been uncovered in that work as well. Is there anyone else? Any other requests? All right. Will you join me in prayer? Gracious and ultimate peace, help us. Help us to heal and be healed. Help us to see and listen. Help us to make the most of every moment that we can to bring about peace in each situation. Help us to calm fears, to teach patience. Help us to be still. Help us to find solitude. Help us in silence. Help us help each other. Help us to continue the work of inner peace and to focus on those outside ourselves who may be needing something more in each moment. We pray for the people of this world. We pray for those hurting and struggling with communication and struggling with justification in Canada. Heal them and bring them guidance for how to navigate their troubles. Be with Aza and these women of Palestine and Israel who are gathered together in Brussels. Bring your spirit of peace upon them. Be with the families, the individuals, all of those within the United States who are entering another political season that will be divisive and contentious. We pray for peace, calm, level heads, patience, forgiveness, love. Be the beacon that we all need in all of these situations that are erupting around the world. Help your people see you and focus on you as our guiding ethic. In your name I pray. Amen.